Finally, there has been a breakthrough in the United States of America regarding aid to Ukraine, which significantly changes Donald Trump's strategy. While everyone was watching the summit between Trump and Xi Jinping in Beijing and counting Russian drones over Kiev, something happened in Congress that could prove to be just as important for the fate of Ukraine. On the evening of Wednesday, May 13, a group of congressmen gathered the necessary 218 signatures on the discharge petition. This is a petition for a discharge vote, and the vote will be on the Ukraine Support Act bill. This means that the bill on aid to Ukraine will still be brought to a vote on the floor of Congress, whether Speaker Mike Johnson wants it or not, and by the way, he didn't want it. And this is a direct path to preserving financial and military aid to Ukraine, which Trump has been blocking for a long time. But let's figure out if everything is really that rosy here. And does this really mean that Ukraine will finally start receiving military and financial aid from the US again? I'm Pechiy. Let's discuss this together. But before we start, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, like this episode, leave any comment under this video, and subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechiy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, on Wednesday, the Democrats in the House of Representatives managed to gather the necessary signatures to bypass Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and force a vote on the sanctions package against Russia and, importantly, billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine. This is already the 8th time in the past 3 years that a discharge petition has been used by various groups of Democrats and Republicans to bypass the Republican leadership. And in the context of Ukraine, this is especially telling. Let me explain the mechanism for those who don't follow the American legislative process, because it's important to understand. A discharge petition is a tool that allows the majority of members of the House of Representatives to pull absolutely any bill out of committee and bring it to a direct vote, bypassing the congressional leadership that is blocking this vote. For example, as requested by the White House. Mike Johnson even blocked bringing the petition to a vote in the House of Representatives. For this, exactly 218 signatures are needed. This is an absolute majority out of the 435 seats in the House of Representatives. And once again, this is the 8th time in 3 years that such a petition has reached the threshold number of signatures, which in itself speaks to the level of dysfunction within Congress. Who signed this petition? All 215 Democrats in the House of Representatives. There are 2 Republicans, Don Bacon from Nebraska and Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania. Both are longtime supporters of Ukraine. And 1 independent, Kevin Kiley from California. He is a former Republican. It was his signature that became the 218th and decisive one. Kiley made a statement that is worth quoting verbatim. Recent Ukrainian successes have created an opportunity for peace, but the failure of the recent ceasefire shows that diplomacy needs leverage to succeed. Congress can act now in a bipartisan way to strengthen this leverage and achieve a lasting peace that protects the interests of the United States and its allies. We must also send a clear signal. Russian support for Iran in its attacks on American military facilities will not be tolerated. And that was the key phrase. Kiley said it directly, linking aid to Ukraine with the war against Iran. Why? Because Russia supplies Iran with drone components. This is documented. Iran uses Russian technology against American military forces in the Middle East region. In addition, Russia supplies everything necessary for the survival of the regime in Tehran through the Caspian Sea. And the longer the regime feels supported, the longer it can survive and the longer it will refuse to make a deal with Trump. For some members of Congress, aid to Ukraine is not about Ukraine, it's about confronting Russia and Iran at the same time. Now, what's actually in this bill? So, the Ukraine Support Act provides more than $1.3 billion in direct aid to Ukraine plus $8 billion in direct loans. So, in total, that's almost $10 billion. Also, there is a replenishment of American military stockpiles which have been depleted by the war with Iran, a special coordinator for Ukraine's reconstruction, tougher sanctions against Russia, and stricter export controls. The bill also supports the US position regarding Ukraine and NATO. But it's important to emphasize this explicitly. A discharge petition does not mean the automatic passage of a bill in Congress. This is the start of the process, not its end. Once the signatures are collected, the procedural clock starts. The floor vote should take place no earlier than the end of this month. But even if the bill passes the House of Representatives now, which is likely to happen, it still needs to go through the Senate, where the Republicans have the majority and block all Democratic initiatives. Well, for example, just the other day in the Senate, the Democrats once again tried to push a resolution to stop a war with Iran, and once again this resolution failed with a vote of 51 to 49. So just one vote decides everything. Right. But again, let's assume even if the Senate passes it, this law still has to be signed by Donald Trump, who even cut the $400 million in annual aid to Ukraine that was included in the US defense budget. Although, of course, there is a hypothetical way out. Congress must have enough votes to override a presidential veto, which is 2/3 of the votes. But for now, of course, such a scenario is unlikely. And unfortunately, I have to note that the legislation is facing resistance from President Trump and his allies in Congress. He opposes legislation supporting Ukraine based on his America First philosophy, prioritizing domestic issues over foreign aid. But such initiatives by American lawmakers are still important for Ukraine, even if they seem to be unsuccessful. The thing is, against the backdrop of this news that US congressmen have become more active on the issue of aid to Ukraine, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte added another layer of pressure, if you will. Mark Rutte proposed that NATO member states allocate 0.25% of their GDP annually to support Ukraine. He presented this proposal at a closed NATO ambassadors meeting in late April while preparing for the July summit in Turkey. In this way, Rutte wants to ensure that support for Ukraine will be consistent and, importantly, predictable. That is, it will be clearly understood that 0.25% of each NATO country's GDP will go entirely to aid Ukraine. And this is a direct response to the unpredictability of Donald Trump himself. And there's another important piece of news in this context. Today, Ukraine launched its own satellites and began forming its own satellite constellation. This is critically important for military intelligence, precise targeting, and secure communications. And most importantly, this means complete independence from US intelligence sharing, which, as I remind you, Trump completely stopped last year. Before that, Ukraine depended primarily on Elon Musk's Starlink. Again, this is a person from Trump's inner circle, and having their own satellites is a step towards strategic independence. If you put all this together, Congress is pressuring Trump from below through the Discharge petition mechanism. NATO is demanding 0.25% of GDP from its allies. That's pressure from above. Ukraine is building its own defense technology infrastructure. This is already independence from any decisions made in Washington. These may seem like three different directions, but they all go in the same direction, toward continued support for Ukraine, regardless of what Donald Trump decides. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and don't forget to give a like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. I would appreciate any support from you. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.